Hi, Giles.
Hey, Carl, how are you doing?
I'm well. How are you?
Very well, thank you, sir. Nice to talk to you.
You too. I'm excited all about this, and we can kind of roll right into it because it seems you have been tasked with handling, I don't know, what's argued as one of the greatest albums of all time, if not the greatest rock album of all time. That's got to be a heavy weight. Did you jump right into that? Were you excited, or was there any hesitation?
There was more hesitation before we did the number ones. I remixed the number ones, which we were reasonably safe on to a certain degree, but we definitely we remixed them, and I didn't want to do it, and then they came out, and people really liked it, and that kind of sort of opened the door to this, I suppose. The fans the people that really feel like they own the music want me to do it. I felt, and so that gives you confidence. And also the Beatles I have a humbling trust with them, but there's a lot of thought process that goes behind it before I start of how we're going to do it and what we should do, and how the music makes you feel is the key thing here.
When you're redoing it, it's not like you want to redo the songs, right? What are you looking for? Is it just to enhance it? I mean, what's the idea that you want to accomplish on something like this?
It's really simple. My view is, okay, how do I remember the song making me feel and making sure that I don't lose that feeling? It's not a question of technical excellence or digital clarity, God forbid. It's more of a question of this has got to, there's two things, is that it's making people like, my kids. So when I go, have you heard that this is the most famous album of all time? And they go, oh, why is everything coming out of one speaker? Or, all those questions. It sounds old. Because the Beatles weren't old when they made it. They were 24, 25, 26. They were younger than probably One Direction were when they broke up. And a recording is a capture is that it's frozen. Time is frozen on a recording. And so the intention is, okay, how do I make it feel like I'm in the studio with the band? I've got these tapes here that sound amazing, but they've been, a lot of them have been transferred. But I want to work off the original tapes that have only been played once, and get people into Abbey Road and get people to feel the sounds, because it does sound amazing.
I mean, there's so much mystique behind that record. And you're talking about the way the songs make you feel, when you were listening to them. And I don't know, because I don't know to what extent that you grew up within the fabric of the Beatles world. Like, I guess what I'm asking is, that question that adolescent kids will ask each other if blue is the same color to each other. Like, were you able to hear the record sort of in the same way that, the legend built into it? Or were you, or did you hear the records as like, oh, that's my dad's friends?
No, I don't know. Because this is a good question, but I think we all have our own feelings and our own opinions, and it would be too bold and pretentious to say that I encompass the listening ship of Sgt. Pepper. I absolutely don't. But I think that here's the thing, and here's the thing that's so difficult to get rid of and should never be got rid of anyway. But the mystique behind Sgt. Pepper is actually the magic that comes from the four guys and my father and Jeff Emmerich, the engineer in the studios. And the thing that surprised me, having now worked on it, is how it's really simple. It's just them in the studios. It's them making noises. It's not. The production is incredibly intricate, but it's not complicated. There's not a whole lot of instruments going on. It's really just very clever, and it's just down to humans. That's just down to the beauty of it. It's down to people singing and people playing instruments with their hands, and you can never take that away. That never gets old, and that's why the album doesn't sound old. It's not synthesizers. It's not programming. It's just them.
Listening to those in-studio conversations had to be a lot of fun too. Were there any that really surprised you?
Yeah, there's things like, there's technical stuff like, George does Within You Without You, which is kind of crazy to think that, here's a man George came from the poorest background of all the Beatles, well, George and Ringo. I mean, yeah, they had no, George grew up with they had no toilet in their house. And then you wind forward, he's 24 years old, and he is writing an Indian spiritual song. Where does that come from? And then there's a section I found with him teaching the Indian Dalruba player the song. He's talking to him and explaining the song to him, and you hear, there's just conversations where you hear John. There's a nice one where John's sort of telling Paul how to sing the song, and then the next take is Paul's telling John how to hear the song. And there's a lot of stuff written about the Beatles, not seeing eye to eye. And the fun thing in the studios, they kind of did. It's also amazing how casual it is. It's what they do. And we have to remember that they certainly didn't ever think that this music was going to be listen to in 50 years' time.
Right.
That wasn't the intention. The intention was just to make a good record. So it's only become iconic since. And so it's the casualness of it that's surprising.
I remember, I think I read an interview with Paul recently of him talking about that. He just didn't assume that anybody would want to hear people chattering away in the studio. And it seems like, especially for fans, that's, I mean, the alternate takes, is Mecca and everything. But just hearing that being a fly on the wall and getting those conversations has been, one of the most fun.
Well, I think what it does, it kind of humanizes the things we think aren't human. We forget, and we forget that actually the beauty of what they did is the fact that it's actually, it's just people are very good at what they do. It's that simple. Do you know what I mean? It's not like there's no my dad didn't press a magic button to make Sergeant Pepper. It's that simplicity that's so appealing to us. I think it's just like, wait a second, you could argue that anyone could do it, but in that argument, you prove to yourself that no, it was them that had to do it. That's why no one's actually, there are very few covers apart from there's Joe Cocker and a few others that make great covers of Beatles songs. You
mentioned your dad. Was he ever able to give you any guidance on what would be vault releases?
On the vault releases, no. The vault releases are actually quite a tough thing. For me, it's not something I take lightly because being in charge of mixing Sgt. Pepper is one thing, but actually deciding on what unreleased material should be released is almost definitely their bag, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's up to them. I'm overriding some decisions that were made for the sake of the fans. But no, he was. Listen, I obviously I grew up with my dad. He was my father, but also I was his ears. He lost his hearing in his 50s, and I became his ears. That was my training, and so we were very, very close. I miss him a lot. He died last year, but I knew I can safely say I know what his tastes were because I grew up with him, and it's that we work very closely. So you can kind of second guess. And I worked on Paul's last album, for instance. I produced that, and so I know you can second guess various opinions on stuff, and it's a fun process.
I love it, and I'm very excited for you in this release. I can't wait to hear the rest of it. So thank you for continuing the tradition and bringing all this music to us, and thank you for the conversation today.
Thank you for listening. It's why we do it.
All right. Well, take care, Giles.
Thank you so much.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.